Hello and welcome back to another document deep dive, the next one in this series. And in the last three videos, we looked at this area here, which represents the northern shoulder, so to speak, of the position of 10th Motorized Infantry Division, namely 20th Infantry Regiment was in this area. This time, we will advance a bit from October into December, the beginning of December, the 1st. And we will instead go to the southern end of the 20th Infantry Regiment sector. So if we go down here, you can see here's still the river, and it continues flowing down here. And at some point, we reach the southern end of the sector, down here. And you can see the river comes down here as well, the river Ushat. And there's two villages here, or rather there's still one, Studenoye, which still exists today, as you can see. And this was in German hands. Now there was another village here, Staraya, which was in Russian hands, and there's not much left of it, or I think there's there seems to be some kind of habitation here, but most of it is destroyed. And this was in Russian hands. And I will flip this around a little bit, you will see later why. This way it's a bit clearer. So we have the river here and a bridge that was here. You can still kind of see the outline here. Maybe there's still a bridge here, a small one. So there is the village of Staraya here, or was. And then a road comes from Studenoye here and crosses the river. And in front of that road, that's where the Russian trench line was. And also a minefield and an obstacle belt. So, as always, we will switch over from Google Earth to my reconstruction. And here we are. So you can see Staraya up there, and the Russian trench system as the Germans knew it in front of it. So you can see this was the forward trench, and here we have the road leading to the bridge. So this is roughly what this looked like in the snow on the 1st of December 1942. This is the obstacle belt. And behind that there was a minefield. I only marked those parts of the minefield that the Germans had marked on their map. I assume there were more minefields here as well. It's just that they weren't marked on the sketch, so I left them out. But basically, obstacle, and after that, mines. So, why do we look at this sector? Well, the Germans wanted to raid it and bring in prisoners, which is a standard reconnaissance tactic during trench warfare. So, here we are, Grenadier Regiment 20, motorized. And it says here, report on the Hagen assault troop operation carried out on December 1st, 1942. First, mission. Break into the enemy positions in the front trench in front of Staraya Sloboda. Roll up on both sides, take prisoners. Einbringen von Gefangenen, take prisoners. Preparation. A. Ground reconnaissance. Through weeks of observation and numerous reconnaissance troops, the approach routes, wire and mine barriers, and the best place to break in were explored. In the process, all the intended members of the assault troop were familiarized with the terrain in turn. B. Aerial reconnaissance. The observations were supplemented by the use of an aerial photograph, which above all determined the exact course of the enemy position system. And this is what I based my reconstruction on. However, the Germans missed one really big, I don't even want to call it a big detail, a big fact, you will see what I mean, which apparently could not be seen on the reconnaissance, on the aerial reconnaissance. C. Based on the reconnaissance results, the operation to replicate the enemy position system was discussed in detail with all the members of the assault troop in a sandbox. Each troop was instructed in its task. So basically they rebuilt in a sandbox a miniature version of this trench system and used it to brief everybody. D. The operation was practiced during the day and then in the dark on a training facility in the field. So, yeah, as you can see, they were quite meticulous in preparing this raid. So, we go down into how this assault troop was, this Stoßtrupp was actually organized. So, obviously, you had a leader and his deputy. There were 4 rifle groups, so basically at this point this would be 1 platoon. And then there were pioneers attached, 2 flamethrower troops, The flamethrowers didn't work. We will talk about that later. There was one demolition troop that was there to blow the obstacles, and 2 destruction troops, which I think were there to destroy enemy installations. Sadly, I have not found any information about how big these were. I assume that the rifle groups were the normal 10 or maybe 12 people, but usually 10. So, one radio guy, 4 stretcher bearers, a medic, and 1 cover group, and this together was the actual assault platoon. And then there was also a cover platoon, which was used in a demonstration. It had a leader, 2 cover groups, and 1 stretcher bearer. And down here it describes the actual armament. The assault platoon was only equipped with submachine guns. So these guys, I assume these 4 rifle groups, was only equipped with submachine guns, pistols, and hand grenades. So they didn't take LMGs with them and no rifles. They had either submachine guns or something like a Luger or a Walther. I assume that they pulled together their MP40s from the complete company. Maybe they also used captured PPSHs, PPDs at this point, maybe. Correct. So then it says they had 21 kilogram charges, or 21 3-kilogram charges served as explosive and destructive weapons, as mines to contaminate the trenches during retreat. The covering groups were equipped with light machine guns and shooting cups, so that basically means they were equipped with rifle grenade equipment, so they had K98Ks and LMGs to cover from a longer distance. To further get an idea how this looked, we go a bit later into the document where they talk about experiences. It says here, the winter camouflage clothing had proved to be useful. White masks were used to camouflage the face with good success. Felt boots were not worn because of the risk of slipping. Weapons and equipment were painted white, which I find interesting. And for the pioneers, it says here, the flamethrowers failed. Also, they had been flaming before the operation, and the glow plugs were protected from moisture. That said, it later would turn out that using the flamethrowers would be pointless anyway. In terms of camouflage paint, I found this picture here, which is, I think, fairly common, of a camouflaged MP40. So this is probably what this roughly looked like. That said, I could not find a picture of a German soldier, like an original picture of a German soldier wearing some kind of white improvised camouflage mask. So instead I decided to sketch that based on a different photo. So they looked probably quite creepy with a white improvised mask and this kind of whitewash on their weapons here. Drew it more like an MP38. So yeah, this is probably what you have to picture them looking like roughly. This is what they had in support, so 2 light and 1 heavy field howitzer battery, 1 light infantry gun platoon, 2 heavy machine gun platoons, and 2 mortar groups. And yeah, so apparently the artillery here, it doesn't go into much detail, but it was pre-planned in order to seal off the attack group when they were in the trench, and they were triggered by some kind of signal flare. Okay, it says here, Durchführung, execution, what actually happened. And it says here, the assault platoon left its own main battle line at 4 p.m. Note here that this is on the 1st of December, as I said, so it would have been fairly dark already. The time was chosen as early as possible, as the enemy is not as alert at this time as they would be later. The cover groups moved in shortly beforehand to secure the advance of the assault platoon in the intermediate field and to reach the assigned positions in time. The assault platoon was initially able to advance 600 meters upright, which took it 1 hour. Then 460 meters had to be crawled to the point of breakthrough. Disfavored by the wind and the good visibility, this took 1 hour and 45 minutes. The 2 engineers assigned to blowing up the barriers placed their charges on the wire and a mine barrier unnoticed by the enemy. A 40-meter-long tube charge, which was carried in 2 parts, was used to blow up the mine lane. It could be pushed under the wire obstacle and onto the minefield without difficulty. The end was reinforced by a 3-kilogram charge under the wire obstacle. Meanwhile, the assault troop had worked its way up to the embankment just in front of the obstacle. At 7 p.m., the charge was ignited and the green-red light signal triggered the screening fire by the artillery. At the same time, the left covering platoon also simulated a break-in by blowing up the obstacle and firing heavily at the enemy position. And this is what you can see here. We have one simulated attack. These are the positions of the machine guns. They blew up the wire in this area and shot at the trenches here, but the main attack was down here. So you can see here the result of that charge going off, which basically was like a Bangalore torpedo. They had a covering group here. This symbol is for the covering group with the light machine gun. Shoot at the trench. And this is the gap that they blew into the obstacle and into the minefield using that charge. The first trench troop reached the enemy trench in one leap. As it was completely covered, a light shaft had to be found through which the assault troop could be channeled into the trench. And this is what the Germans apparently missed during reconnaissance. This trench was basically a tunnel. It was completely covered except these air and light shafts that are mentioned. In fact, I will go a bit later, or I will go a bit further in the document where it talks about enemy position and enemy behavior. It says here, the enemy had only occupied the embrasures. The trench system is up to 1 meter and 70 centimeters deep, free of snow, and, with the exception of the rifleman's position, covered in a roof. The embrasures and rifleman's positions are reinforced with steel shields. Rolling up such a trench system is associated with considerable difficulties. The first break-in is considerably delayed by the fact that only one man can get in at a time. The total darkness prevents a quick roll-up. It is only possible if the exact course of the trench is known. In order to be protected from surprises, the assault troops must constantly throw hand grenades and cover the trench with fire. Shelters must be blown up immediately. The enemy, who can easily find his way around this trench system, clears it as far as he still has the opportunity, perhaps with the intention of doing so, since aimless advances are not possible, and this is the easiest way to avoid destruction or capture. Taking prisoners in this way is almost impossible, since the assault troops must, for their own safety, destroy the enemy wherever they appear, or are even suspected, since their behavior cannot be predicted in the dark. After the trench troops, a search party must examine the position with flashlights in order to at least be able to take papers from the dead or identify, quote, apparently dead, unquote, people. So, yeah, they had this problem. They arrive at the trench and notice, well, this isn't actually a trench, this is basically a tunnel. It goes on in the report. To speed this up, 2 entrances were made. The fighting position, which was located directly at the point of the breach, only opened fire on the last members of the assault troop when they jumped through the mine lane. As a hand grenade thrown into the fighting position from behind did not put the crew out of action, the fighting position was blown up with a 3-kilogram charge. I assume that this fighting position was maybe here. The trench was rolled up according to plan. It was extremely difficult in the covered trench. As a result, the attack target to the left could not be fully reached. The enemy evacuated the facilities that had initially been touched in a hurry. However, resistance increased more and more. The enemy defended themselves with hand grenades and submachine guns. Hand grenades were sometimes thrown from outside through the air shafts. Approximately 10 minutes after the break-in, heavy enemy mortar fire was directed at the break-in site. And this shows the route that the Germans took in those trenches, as well as the directions in which Russians fled, according to the Germans. So they reached until here on the right side, until here on the left side, which was apparently not as far as they wanted to go, as they said, and this is when they started to receive mortar fire. The report goes on. The sentries in the embrasures, who had no opportunity to move out of the way, fought back until they were destroyed. The trench troops had to throw hand grenades in front of them and constantly bombard the pitch-black trench with submachine gun fire. Fighting positions and shelters were blown up with 3-kilogram charges. At 7:30 p.m., the signal to disengage was given by a whistle cartridge. The assault troops disengaged smoothly after the trench was mined and had been smuggled back through the mine lane by 7:25 p.m. This is a bit weird, like if they gave the signal at 7:30 p.m., why were they out of there 5 minutes earlier? That must be some kind of, maybe they mean 35 p.m., I don't know. The support weapons were notified by 2 green flares. At 8:15 p.m., the assault troops had all reached their own position. Another thing that they mentioned is that the S-mines were left in the trench after they evacuated it, And apparently they did hear explosions shortly after they had reached their own lines. So apparently the Russians ran into those S-mines when they tried to reoccupy their own trench. So this is what, according to the Germans, is the final tally. Own losses: 1 dead, 3 seriously wounded, 7 slightly wounded, 4 remain with the troops. Enemy losses counted dead: 8. They were not able to bring in a prisoner, which was the actual goal, although they still called this a success. Sorry about that. They also say the losses are likely to be significantly higher, as they were difficult to detect in the dark trenches and the retreating Russians were pursued with submachine gun fire. They also ran into the excellent blocking fire of the infantry guns and heavy mortars. So the blocking fire obviously ran across this line here and probably directly on Staraya as well. So yeah, no prisoners brought in. They did lose a guy permanently and also heavily wounded, but they were able to get all of them out apparently. So yeah, the Germans were still quite happy with their success. To me personally, it seems like they did kind of screw up the reconnaissance if they didn't notice that they weren't really dealing with a trench but a tunnel, and they didn't get a prisoner out, so it seems a bit of a pointless action, but this is something that characterizes the kind of trench warfare, these kind of small engagements that everybody forgets about because they don't really achieve much. Anyway, next time we will go back to the northern sector, also in the winter, but this time it's the Russians who are enacting their own little scheme to capture prisoners, and they actually brought tanks for that. So you can look forward to that probably final video in the series. Hope you enjoyed it, thanks for watching and have a nice day.